Right, so welcome back. And yeah, we're about to kind of move into the last stretch, as it were. And what I want to do is I want to introduce you to a fabulous narrativist called Vanessa Jackson, who combines narrativism with healing, but also with activism. And she's going to tell you today about a project which relates to hope, history, inquiry, and connection. And yeah, I think that she has an awful lot to give, and especially now. Thank you, Vanessa.
Okay, thank you, Anita. It's so good to be. I wish I were in Liverpool. Let me just say that. And this is a bit of a coming home for me because I guess it was 2003 was the conference.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that Anita, you suggested to me and a group of African-American women specifically was that we visit the International Slavery Museum. And it was a stunning experience. And one of the things that I said at the time was that I don't think we'll ever be able to tell a truth like this in the US. And the project that I'm going to talk about today is actually made a liar out of me. And I'm kind of okay with that. Because we were able, through the brilliance of a man by Brian Stevenson, and you'll see him in a clip later on, to be able to have a museum and a memorial and a sculpture park that really chronicles enslavement and its connection to present day oppression and mass incarceration. So thank you for being here. And so it's a coming home for me. And I'm grateful to Liverpool for giving me that experience and starting me on a journey to really look at how to use history to heal and how truth-telling makes a difference and builds, more importantly, solidarity. And we need solidarity more than ever right now. So I am going to switch to a PowerPoint. I swear it will not be death by PowerPoint. I hope it won't be. Let me just say that. But let me get my little technology together here. And I think, is David D in the room somewhere?
Sorry? No.
David Dimbrow?
No, he was with us by Zoom like you, Vanessa.
Okay, but I feel his energy in the room. All right. So we're talking about co-creating narratives of hope, history, inquiry, and connection. And we just celebrated, and I use the term loosely here in the US, our liberation from y'all. And while we're oppressing everybody else. And we have some hopeless times right now. There's a real air of despair. And I think we need hope. We need to remember our power. And so this is a perfect time in my mind for us to gather and explore possibilities. So I'm just glad to be here. So here we go. One of the things I think about history is that this quote really stands out for me. If you believe people have no history worth mentioning, it's easy to believe they have no humanity worth defending. And in our Radical Optimist group, back in October, we had a group that came in. They were working mostly in Arab communities right before the assaults on Gaza. People had family in the room, in the region, in the path. And I remember a woman saying, like, I don't feel like we should have to do a PR campaign for our humanity. And I think way too often in our world, we don't know each other's history. We don't know each other's lives. And then we can do great violence. And so for me, history is a really important way for us to step back and know each other's stories and to see where we're all connected. So one of the things I've been working on, I presented on this years ago with probably three or four questions at that time, is a framework for thinking about healing and thinking about inquiry. And so what came about was based on the work of Pomani Yellowbird that she offered of her indigenous tradition here in the US, was some healing questions. And we have added to those questions over the years, always going back to Pomina to make sure that it fits with the original intent of her people and her healers. And so the questions are, what happened to you or your people? how does what happened to you affect you now? How, in spite of what happened, have you been able to triumph? And that's really important. People need footholds of hope. What are the external factors that create or maintain the power wound, the injury that is affecting people? What needs to be healed? And that's a two-part one. It's both what is still injured and what needs to be brought to bear to heal. And what gifts have you or your people received out of the wounding experience? Not that we want it to happen, but it's really about the meaning making of what happened. And then the last question is, what lessons or wisdom can you share with others based on your experience? And for me, this is a question that both talks about healing, but also about solidarity with others who might be in similar circumstances. And so this framework I've been working on for many years, and then I quite frankly stumbled into a community of women. We now have one man in our group now, that allowed me to take these framework and really bring it to life at a whole new level. And that's the Radical Optimist Collective. And it's currently a group of 10 of us, multiracial. And what we do is that we do a lot of consultations with organizations, but the heart of our work is based in Montgomery, Alabama, which is very significant in the US as a home site of a major civil rights activism. And right now is a place where that's been drawing people to it to really help us to rethink the history of enslavement and mass incarceration. So with the Radical Optimists and with this great community, we cultivate brave space. We bring people together, oftentimes with organizations, so they have our previous connection. And we walk them through, support them through, invite them, ignite conversations about racism, about white supremacy, about its ongoing impact, but more importantly, about how we can work together in knowing each other to bring about change, big and small. And this is our group. And there's 4 people. And we came together to do initial facilitation for somebody. And we stay together out of love, commitment, and a deep and abiding hope that we can change something. One of the things, I don't know if this is happening where you live, but I'm sure it probably is somewhere, is that this whole sense of the suppression of histories, and especially accurate history, and who gets to tell a history. And so one of the things that I saw online was be brave enough to teach the history they're trying to erase. And that has been an ongoing battle for African Americans in the US to be able to tell our history, to know our history, both as a way to heal our own wounds, but also as a way to share who we are with broader allies. So I go to Montgomery, and I'm going to show you a couple of next slides are about what we experienced in Montgomery. And so I want you to know what I'm talking about and see what I'm talking about. This is an incredible statue. I think the tallest one might be 18 feet. So I don't know that you get the scale here. And they're put together, created by an incredible artist and activist in Montgomery by the name of Michelle Browder, who basically wanted to tell the story of the enslaved women who had been, quite frankly, tortured by Dr. Marion Sims, who's considered the father of gynecology and whose statue sits at the state capitol in Alabama. And she felt like their story was more important. And in fact, their sacrifice and their survival, they were actually repeatedly experimented on to refine gynecological techniques without anesthesia, even after anesthesia was available, because their lives did not matter. And so Michelle put together this incredible art installation in Montgomery. And also with that, because while art is transformative, she also understood as it was an educational tool that it would provide an opportunity for people to look at broader issues, especially ongoing issues for African-American women. And so she has, this year was the 3rd year of the conference, planning our way for 2025. Anarcha, Lucy, and Betsy were the 3 named women that Sims experimented on. But what she has been able to do is talk about bridging the gap to equitable maternal health, reproductive justice, and bodily autonomy through the stories of these women, because this is an ongoing issue for us as Black women in America. The other place, and I'm gonna turn on this video and hope I can get out at some point, is the Equal Justice Initiative Museum, which is the vision of an amazing attorney, Brian Stevenson. And he has done what I didn't think was going to happen. And so I want you to just sort of imagine yourself in this incredible space and hear Brian, a little bit of Brian's story.
We believe there's important work that has to be done in this country to fully overcome the history and legacy of slavery. It's important that we begin to commit to an era of truth and justice, that we tell the truth about our history, that we find the words necessary to understand all of the pain, all of the suffering that was created by 400 years of enslavement, lynching, segregation, and injustice. It begins in Africa, where millions of people were kidnapped, abducted, taken from their homes, taken from their families, chained, forced onto ships where they were displaced forever. Without understanding that legacy, we don't appreciate the harm, the damage, the tragedy that surrounded the founding of this country. We still live in a country where there is this problem of racial inequality, racial injustice, and the narrative that created that problem of racial difference continues to haunt us today. And so this museum is dedicated to helping people understand the journey. We want people to understand the suffering that slavery created. The demographic geography of America was shaped largely by racial terror. A landscape, a legal architecture that codified racial hierarchy continued to shape life in this country. This society, this country, this nation has work to do to fully overcome the history and legacy of slavery. At the Legacy Museum, we believe an important experience awaits each and every person, that there is a journey that must be taken to create a different kind of future. It is hard to confront these painful truths, but the powerful thing is that when we have the courage to learn the truth, we open up doors that permit justice, that permit reckoning, that permit healing. This museum is dedicated to creating a society where the children of our children are no longer burdened by the legacy of slavery, no longer presumed dangerous and guilty, no longer haunted by racial inequality no matter where they go. But to get to that society, we all have a role to play. And that's why we want you to come to Montgomery and not just see the sights, but to hear the sounds, to experience the spirit of the people who lived here, who have fought here, who have worked here, and to take that spirit with you out into the world where you can do the same. You can continue to find ways to advance justice in your society, your community, your neighborhood.
So, I think you got to see a little taste of what is the museum. And this is a slide, this particular slide right now, which I hope is showing for y'all. This is a sculpture when you enter. So the museum is one part of the Equal Justice Initiatives project, which is primarily a law firm. I think sometimes people kind of miss that. And they also have a memorial, which is really for me, especially some sacred space, because it has these panels that you can see in the distance have names inscribed, names and locations of lynchings in America, and explains the different ways that people, different quote unquote reasons why people were lynched, and the public nature and the sort of function to terrorize not just one family, but to terrorize entire communities, and where there would be crowds of 10,000 people. Public spectacle is what he certainly helps us understand about that. And the terror that was designed to invoke in communities. And one of the things that they talk about, we had an opportunity to sit with Brian Stevenson back in October, where he talked about he had to do this museum. He said, why would a law firm do a museum? Well, because he says to help people understand and care about people who are incarcerated, we had to help them understand the legacy and white supremacy and enslavement and how it survives today and has morphed over time. And so that was one of the really important pieces and why he created this. And they talk about being in the hope business. And I know sometimes when we talk to people about before they go in, is we tell them that it is really a hard story. It's a very hard story, and one that we have been lied to about for many, many years. But that there's a way that is created in both the presentation of information and spaces to pull your head back that makes it bearable, but that we have to bear witness and we have to know the truth. And EJI will say all the time, we are in the business of hope. We tell this story because we want people to know. We tell this story because we want people to understand not only the trauma, but we want to understand the resistance and the resilience that was also part of our experiences as Africans in America. One of the things that we also want to talk about in terms of why this is important for change is when I think about healing this kind of trauma, what I call power wounds, is that there are kind of 4 aspects in my mind. You name it, you analyze it, you strategize, and you act. And I think what we try to create in our work in Montgomery are ways for people to understand that frame and to move through it in the initial experience and hopefully carry it on to what they do at home. We understand what we do there is only a very small part of what needs to happen. But what we also need to understand is we are up against forces that don't want this to happen. And so one of the things that I think right now is going on, which is compromises people's hope, is that if you disrupt healing and connection, you will keep people from taking action. And so one of the ways that it happens now is the way that you undermine the naming process is you silence or disrupt it. People don't get to know. We take history out of the schools. In terms of the analysis part, we dumb down the conversation to talking points and bumper sticker slogans, to sabotage analysis, or we tell people it's too complicated for the average person to understand. To strategize in terms of how we disrupt strategizing opportunities is we create divisions, hierarchies, false urgency that make us think we don't have time to stop. And here's the thing I tell people, if we don't have time to do it right, we don't have time to do it over. And that we don't have the time. We tell ourselves we don't have the time to create a strategy for the common good, but I don't think we'll survive if we don't have it. And we feel overwhelmed and immobilized and mired in despair, so we don't act. And I think that if we have these spaces and we hear these stories and we understand the history and the legacy of our people, my people specifically, who against great odds got out of bondage and built lives for themselves in the face of great violence. One of the amazing things that's happening with the Legacy Museum is they opened a sculpture park. And you would say all the kind of problems in the world right now, especially African-American people in America, why would we invest in a sculpture park? Because beauty is liberatory as well. And this is one of the entry points into it. And the Alabama River was a place where slave ships were brought in and we were offloaded as merchandise and commodities. And so what EJI did was they created a pathway, and you can take a boat into the dock for the 17-acre park that in some ways puts you almost in the same feeling of the persons who were enslaved coming to an unknown place by water, not knowing what was on the other side. This time we get to experience beauty, and that is very meaningful. In that park, they also have a wall that shows us, they took the 1870 census. In the US, African Americans, unless they were free, and that was a rarity, were not listed as individuals on the US Census. We were listed as property. And so what they did was they took the 1870 census and created a wall with the list of all the names that freed African Americans used once they were able to be identified individually. And so on this wall, I was able to find Dudley. It's there in the middle, like the fourth line down, which is one of my family names. And so it's a way to give back to us, a healing way to give back to us our history and the individuality of our ancestors. Also in the park, this was put in before I got to see it, so this is a photo. I didn't get to see the photo itself. Is a huge sculpture, and for me, this really captures the work that we're trying to do as a Radical Optimist Collective. In that open heart, it feels like a ripped heart some days, but is an opening through which we can walk through to something new. And I just think they did a beautiful job with their imagery. This is a room where I think the magic happens. And this is a room that we use in a renovated building, the Crest department store, which at the time was a segregated department store. So African Americans couldn't shop there except for on certain times. And what we do is we gather in a circle and we create a container so that we can bear witness to our own experiences going through these museums and to have a kind of brave conversation about what we experienced and to begin to plot, of course, for what we do when we get home. We understand people are with us for about from like 9 to 5, and that includes time at the museum and at the memorial. And we try to pace it so that people can catch their breath and that people can take quiet time and people can connect. But we have time before the visit to the museum and memorial where we help people get grounded. We understand this is a mind, body, spirit experience. We are going to be encountering material and information that we have been deprived of. And so we start with a grounding, getting people in their body, giving them tools to use throughout the journey. And we ask them, like, what are their intentions? What do they want to experience? What do they want to have happen? What are their hopes in some ways for what they experienced at the museum and memorial? And they can share that in the group. They can write it down in their own journals. We give them journals so that they're reflecting. And then we also ask people, because we understand with such charged materials that, you know, what do you need from your colleagues, or you need them to know about how you may process this experience? It's really important for everybody, but especially for folks of color that come, because oftentimes it's so overwhelming that you might need time alone, you might need time to talk, and we want people to try to think about that before they go, but also reminding the group that at any point you get a new understanding, it's really okay to say what you need, and for people to be very respectful and give folks space. What we do then is we follow people. When we go over to the museum, we are present as a Radical Optimist Collective, as facilitators, to be present for people and to support them, to be the person if someone needs to process, that they can process with as they go through the experience. And then in the afternoon, after that, we come back. And this is the deeper work, where we usually spend about 90 minutes, sometimes up to 2 hours, depending on the size of the group, where we're asking them these 3 pillars of our conversations is what, so what, and now what. So the what is what sticks with you, what stands out for you, what's on your heart from what you experienced, and giving people a time to talk about that. One of the things that we do sometimes, depending on the group, is that we might break into affinity groups. So we might have white-bodied people in a group so that they can talk in ways that they need to talk, and for people of color to have their own group, because oftentimes there is so much sort of stirred up that it's not always helpful to be in mixed groups at that point. And we let the group decide how they want to do that, and then guide them through that process, and always bring them back together to talk about what they experienced and what might be the next steps collectively on their journey for healing and finding hope. The so what is that, given the work you do, what are the implications? So it's like, what happened, but now what do we do with this? You know, how do we analyze and strategize about how you might do your work differently based on what you experience? And then the last sort of reflection is, now what? So what are your renewed commitments? What are your thoughts about? They might be personal, they might relate to work, they might be both. And what we do at that time is we ask people to write it down. We've now with technology, a lot of people are starting to put it on their phone, use it as a screensaver, like, because it's very easy to be somewhere, have a really powerful experience, and then file it somewhere. And so we want people to really work with this. And I'll tell you, one of the things that really stood out for me, this group, I think about how hopefully people are transformed by our work there. What I'm also struck is how it is something that I get transformed by every single time. I've probably done about 25 of these groups. One of our folks has done probably 100 of them. And where it is an opportunity when I'm in circle with people to hear something new every single time. And I remember that there was a young woman, a Palestinian woman, who, while we were talking, was building a house of cards. And I was kind of watching as a facilitator and like, is she engaged? And then I realized she's first of all in a trauma response, probably, because it's a very terrifying time. But I also thought that that was probably the best description with that house of cards of how we all felt in a moment. The fragility of hope, the fragility of our connections, and that her sitting there in that room, listening, still very much listening, showing up for the history of other people when her own people were under attack. I thought, this is what love looks like. This is what solidarity looks like. We need to find each other again. We all need to find each other. And so for me, having these moments was a time of great hope. And who doesn't like Joan Baez? But action is the antidote to despair. And one of the things I've been talking about from the fallout from COVID and everything is that we are in despair, collective depression, and we need to find our way through it. And we need to find our way through it with each other. And I think that's why it's important to have this conference and to nurture hope. Because I think when we sit with each other and see each other's pain, also see each other's triumphs, that there are new possibilities, that we have the answers in our own circles and in our connections with others. This is a proverb that's in one of the narrative therapy journals, and I've always loved it because it reminds me in this moment. And that looks like bamboo, but it's bamboo. It is not a fragile thing. Let me tell you, I've got some running away in my yard. A stick on its own is easily broken, but if you put in a bundle, that bundle is very strong and you cannot break it. A spirit on its own is easily broken, but together we will not break it. That things in the way. That is our power and that is strength. We got to remember that we can do this together. We can do it by listening. We can do it by hearing. This is one of the things I love about, our narrative community is that you bring stories from so many different places, strategies from so many places, and then collectively we make something bigger and better. Everybody needs our hope. Everybody needs our optimism. We call ourselves radical optimists because we know that it is hard work. We got to get to the root of things, but that we stay optimistic about the possibilities for human beings to save each other and save ourselves. And so I want to end with one last thing, because I felt like Liverpool gave me something beautiful 21 years ago, and they gave us all something beautiful, the Beatles. And we have had in America, because we still can't figure out race right. Beyonce did a country album and people kind of lost their minds. But one of the songs completely, see, we have work to do, right? But I want to share it back because I feel like this song both shows what happens when we conjure and create a gumbo together of who we are. And what happened when Beyonce recorded this particular song is that people heard the backstory for the Beatles on why Blackbird was even written, and that it was a celebration and an honoring of civil rights activists. And so I want to close with a sharing of this song.
Thank you very much, Vanessa.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us here in Liverpool and drawing out the connections with that conference 21 years ago, and helping us think about history and inquiry and connection and the strength of connection and the necessity of history. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Y'all take care. Bye-bye.